Once again, we're in the tent today with Gwen Edwards, a veteran of the startup world and the ecosystem and all kinds of crazy things, AT&T and Astia. And you've done so many different things. Gwen, thanks for making time and joining us in the tent today. You obviously must be filled with amazing stories of all the crazy things you've seen along the way. But anyway, we want to thank you for making time and coming and joining us here today. Tell us a little bit about
I wish
Gwen.
the tent were really in the Middle East.
You know what? It will be soon. We're going to be over there. So, yes, this is our little tent in Palo Alto.
Our little tent in Palo Alto.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, welcome. Tell us a little bit about Gwen. Again, some of the things that you've done along the way. And then tell us a little bit about what you're up to nowadays.
Okay. All right. So, when you say veteran, I guess 10 years makes you a veteran in the Valley, right?
I think so. Most of the people are like getting started. So, well,
5 years might make you a veteran.
Veteran, like I mean, the stuff you saw at AT&T makes you an experienced veteran. So, I mean, I can't imagine like some of the stuff that you saw along the way. But again, so just
well, yeah, I would say a veteran from the tech industry.
Yeah, maybe that's right.
Yeah.
Nice.
No, I mean, I was involved. If I tell you the things I've seen, you'll think I'm 120 years old.
No, come on.
But it's that change has happened so amazingly fast.
Yeah.
And I was really involved at Stanford Research Institute, where I first started my career, when the ARPANET was the big thing. And so thanks to a lot of good federal foresight and government funds and major universities involved, it was just the hotbed of innovation. Xerox PARC was here, kind of the early days of NASA and Institute for the Future, and early things that Steve Jobs was working on, and Bob Metcalf, and people from Sun Microsystems. So I don't think I knew then what I was in the middle of that was so fascinating. I knew it was fascinating, but who knew what it would become? Yeah. So what a great place to get my feet wet. Yes,
and feet wet you got. But so tell us a little bit. So you spent a long time as VP of Sales and in the sales role at AT&T. And that obviously isn't a startup,
right?
But tell us a little bit, like what you learned along the way, and how that's actually helping you now with some of the stuff that you've got cooking now.
Okay, great. Yeah, good question. So I think what's really most important to note is that throughout my career, I did end up in a role that was heavily sales oriented, and it was actually SBC, which is now AT&T, but throughout my career, I was constantly, for reasons I didn't understand, tapped on the shoulder and asked to go build something new.
That's funny.
It's like, okay, look, we're going to put you in charge of X. And I used to say, but I don't know anything about X. And I was kind of labeled the person who would think out of the box, liked to take risk, even though it was often inside a larger company. And I loved that. So I was very, very fortunate in my career in many ways because I had those opportunities. And so I was doing everything from, from initially doing the business plan around R&D at Bell Northern Research in that system that ultimately got me into what's now AT&T. And then working closely with R&D. So I was really doing product definition, product development, then got into a position where I was asked to take over a sales function, and I thought, I don't do sales. I'm R&D and tech, and you know, I thought of sales as blue suede shoes. And I was coached by a good friend of mine to grab that opportunity to get that line field experience. That there's nothing more valued. There's nothing more valued in a company than people who deliver the top line revenue. And so I thought, okay, I'll give it a try. And it was true throughout my career that when forced into one particular function or not, I would be pushed into the direction of sales because I could execute.
Which, you know, I hear a lot of people always talking about there's a lack of engineering talent, and that's kind of one of the issues in the Valley. But to be a good sales VP of sales or someone that's driving sales, especially enterprise, is not easy. And
it's not.
And there are not that many people who really get it. For a long time, by the way, my first job was selling women's shoes at Macy's. I did sales in that sense, but then selling a product or a software is difficult. So you know, that obviously must have been an interesting experience. And Tell us a little bit about what kind of things you were selling, and what you learned along the way.
Well, and I think if you've been in sales, even if it's shoes, you probably know that half of the sales process, if not more, is listening.
Yeah.
People don't intuitively get that. They think that you have to have your spiel and you're always pitching. Well, you're really intensely listening, and if you really listen and ask good questions, you then translate that into what you know you have that will fill a need.
Yeah.
And I think the skill and really good salespeople do that translation well.
And quickly.
And they listen again, and they adapt. And what I loved about the process was when I could take those needs that I'm hearing, and if I knew we didn't have a perfect match, I'd take that back to my technical teams and say, hey, if we could do this, if we could tweak this, we'd be golden. And the teams love that. Technical people typically, they love to know that it's relevant what they're building.
Of course.
And I loved nothing more than knowing that what I'm selling isn't just going to be something I bring to my company's bottom line and my pocketbook and commission, but it's really about a need that you then build on top of. So that's, I think, the common thread, and why having technical acumen and background is really helpful in the process.
Definitely.
So what I find in working with early stage companies that I've taken with me from all of that experience is how unbelievably important it is to have that customer connection. Even if you don't think you know who the customer is, or you think, well, gee, we've just got to prototype something and get it out there because we're going to drive the process, not elicit.
Yeah.
It's so powerful at the very beginning of the process to engage in that dialogue with whoever you think might be influencers or buyers. And I like to say that there's a huge difference between pitching someone that is now your potential customer and sitting back and going in to talk to somebody when you can actually say, we're thinking about committing the next 2 years of our life or 3 years of our lives and X dollars into building something that looks like this. Could I talk to you and get some input from you? You're in a key decision-making role, or you're such a great thought leader.
Yeah.
Could I just get half an hour of your time?
Yeah. Sorry.
I would really value that. Now, as soon as I say that to you, in that way, your body language changes, right?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you're happy, you're open. You'll say, oh, well, you care about my opinion?
Yeah.
Sure, I'd love to talk to you.
Totally.
And if I say, but if I didn't do that, and I get my ego invested in what I'm building, and I come to you 6 months or a year from now and say, well, I got to talk to you. I got to tell you what I got.
Totally.
You'll sit back and you'll go, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
What you got?
What you got? Exactly.
Okay. Well, I don't like this. And you won't open up. And it's in that process before things are cast in concrete that kind of customer orientation and sales, I don't even want to call it training, it just seems to be
it's learning
in your
process.
DNA.
Yeah, exactly.
When you love people and you like to engage with them and understand their needs and be creative about satisfying those, I think that's what you take into the startup ecosystem.
I'll tell you, a lot of the entrepreneurs nowadays don't really understand that, because I think not that fundamentally you learn that at a big corporation like AT&T, but I think the DNA, like you call it, of instead of selling, listening and really adapting, let's call it the pitch, to the needs of the customer, empowers them. It makes them feel like they're involved, and that their opinion matters, and then that you actually care, and you're not just trying to shove another piece of software down their throat and charge them X amount of dollars. So those are really important points that I think a lot of people nowadays miss, and that's why there are not that many good salespeople around. And again, when we say sales, I mean hardcore, especially in enterprise, where it's a sales cycle and you know what to do, and it's 3 to 6 months. So a lot of entrepreneurs are missing that, and I think partially that's why I think there's more consumer companies out there, because I think a lot of the entrepreneurs think that enterprise products are too hard to sell or to manage. So I've seen this trend, and a lot of the investors also like consumer deals. So tell us a little bit.
That's an interesting thing that's kind of flipping back and forth. A friend of mine is Cindy Padnos, who runs a venture fund.
Yeah, she's going to be on the show soon.
Oh, great, 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 great. So she's doing really well now in enterprise, and it's almost counter-cyclical. But so I think there's still people out there doing that.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Obviously, seizing the moment. Yeah.
Okay, so then tell us a little bit, how did you transition from there to, becoming an angel investor and, some of the things you're doing now? I know you did a stint at Astia, and tell us about that experience maybe. But tell us, how did you go from big corporate behemoth to, what you're up to now?
So I jumped in with head, heart, soul, body, everything. It was in 2000, June of 2000, when the market was tanking, but I thought I was invincible. And I really fell in love with an opportunity that was venture-backed, and I thought, I'll take every ounce of my experience and I'll just jump in. I can turn this ship around. So I was the hired gun to come into a company and turn it around from a B2C to a B2B. And the market around us was just imploding.
Wow.
And the telecom industry was imploding, and I had the opportunity to learn that I was not invincible. And that was a humbling experience. And it also opened my eyes to everything else that's about venture and the ecosystem here and what it's like, what it takes, the challenges, but also the opportunity. And so after that, I thought, gee, was my experience just my experience, or is that really what happens? And how do you know when you can turn a company and not? And was there something I missed? So I was doing all of the self-evaluation that happens, and found a number of friends in the Valley that were saying, well, wait a minute, come help me with my company. I'm trying to pivot in this direction. And so that led me to a series of stints, I would say, with other early stage companies where I technically was working as a advisor to the CEO and working under a contract. And it was a fantastic way to get additional perspective. And then I got hooked. I was addicted. So I really have just been having a lot of fun continuing that course, doing active consulting advising work with CEOs. And then the other interesting dimension I've brought is that because I understand the way that Fortune 500 or Fortune 50 thinks and acts and operates, and I enjoy still working with them on key problems, particularly if it has to do with revenue growth and needing to make a shift, and I take that sales background back in, I like to keep one foot in that world and a foot with the entrepreneurs. So
which is a bridge.
It's a bridge. And being that bridge, I find that large companies love it because they want to have a finger in what's happening in the entrepreneurial world. And small companies, especially if they don't happen to have that experience, want to understand, well, how do these people really think? How do I get in there? How do I bring value?
Because I can tell you, I've seen a couple of thousand early stage companies in the last few years being involved, Founder Institute, and just being around the ecosystem. And I see one of the biggest hurdles is this bridge. So when I was at Founder Institute, we were trying to do a deal with HP, where this was when WebOS was big. We were trying to have the companies graduating create apps for WebOS, and basically HP give grants. So the idea was this global partnership, and I actually ended up talking to Leo himself about it. And,
oh, wow.
And that was the whole story. I've told that story. But anyway, so the deal didn't happen because
I met him a few times.
And I left. But the point is that it was so difficult to get that communication bridge built, because to the startup, they look at HP or any, not specifically picking on HP, but any big corporation as this behemoth. And sometimes you get lucky and you meet the right person who carries the deal forward or takes responsibility or just champions it. But a lot of times it gets kind of stuck in this middle management and it never moves forward. And again, as a startup, you're so quick and agile, and that doesn't work. You can't wait 9 months to do a deal. And so the one of the organizations that I think tries to do this is the Telecom Council. So Liz and the guys, they try to be this bridge, and so that's really important because it's fundamentally missing. The large corporations now, I think, are starting to realize that they can't innovate internally, but yet still there's that lost in translation where the connection is not made. So people like yourself are really actually facilitating potentially innovation being infused in the larger corporations and obviously resources and stuff to the startups.
I hope so. I mean, that is so much fun, and there's such a need. And the other thing you reminded me of is that when you think about trying to work with the HP or the AT&T, the large corporation, one of the key things that dropping this mic. One of the key things that can be done is when you understand who in that large corporation, who do they want to buy from?
Yeah.
So if you understand their food chain, and sometimes they'll sit down and explain it to an entrepreneur, if you've got the right person, but when you understand that food chain, as the smaller company, you can go into one of the vendors who then takes you in. But it's nice to have clarity around, you've got a value proposition that that large company wants. They just would rather buy it through someone that they can, they've got that contractual relationship with, they've got more invested in them. And also, sometimes the largest companies don't want to be responsible if they somehow pull the order or they decide this isn't quite right, and then your company's at risk.
I know.
So it's that interesting balance.
It is a balance, and I see people struggling with it all the time. Like here you are, you're a startup, you think you've built this amazing thing, and you know that this big company
needs
should or love this and pay you top dollars, and you're just banging your head against the wall. But again, there almost needs to be this facilitator or this bridge built where either someone endorses you or really gets to the right person efficiently.
Right.
So that's very, very important, and I think a lot of people still are struggling with this and don't really understand this. Gwen, we have this part of the show that's called Lessons Through Stories.
Okay.
And I think I showed you the board, but just as a quick reminder, I'll show you the topics again. Basically, what we want to do is we want to have you tell a funny, maybe interesting story around one of these topics, ideally that you haven't told before, and it's supposed to be a lesson that you learn through one of these that really has had an influence on you or on business or just something interesting. Add a human element to a lesson.
Well, one of those I see is first investment, and
perfect.
I could talk about that. It's still crystal clear.
Excellent.
So I have been working with early stage companies, also taking those steps in actually becoming an investor as an angel. And it's extremely high risk, and even though you know what all the statistics are, I think it's, in this environment, it's still pretty enticing.
Yeah.
And when you think you can make a difference to a company, it's a pretty phenomenal opportunity and experience. So I am very involved with a group called Golden Seeds, and I'm also been very involved with Astia and still am very involved with them. And to that question, what was so interesting, I've heard many people say this, and they say it's so hard to write the first check.
Yeah.
Like it's your money, and you're sitting there thinking, I could take 10 amazing vacations. I still want desperately to go to the Galapagos Islands. I haven't been. I could think of a million things I'd like to do with my money. And I look at that and think, trade-offs, trade-offs. Well, when you write, it's hard to write that first check. The first investment I made, I remember afterwards thinking, okay, I may have just completely, that's in the, it's done, it's gone. I may never see that again, because that's the reality, 9 out of 10, right? And what was so interesting was I shared that with a very good friend of mine that evening. And I said, you know what, I have to tell you something. I think I might have just lost all this money. And this friend said, but Gwen, I know how much you love those entrepreneurs. Their product is brilliant. What they're trying to do in the world is really a good thing. And if that comes true and it doesn't work out, imagine how good you'll feel knowing that you did something along the way to affect people's lives, the people they're hiring, that the entrepreneurs themselves were phenomenal. And wouldn't that be better than seeing the market collapse, or you know, the mutual funds drop. You don't really know where your money is at night. Somebody says to me, do you know where your money is tonight and what work it's doing in the world? Actually, that came from the president of the New Resource Bank, so I'll quote him. But it's, you know, do you really know? And you don't. And so I thought that was very, very cool. Now, the extra nice thing about that story is that that investment may turn out to be one of my best, if not best.
Wow.
At the end of the day. So we'll knock on wood.
Knock on wood.
One thing about angel investing is you usually never know for many, many years.
Yeah. How long ago was that investment?
4 years ago.
4 years. Yeah. Okay. So, which brings up a kind of a quick point, is that it does take a lot of time to build a company. So, in one of the other segments, we talked about patience. So, as an angel investor, you have to be patient. It's very risky, but you have to do it because you like the team, you like the product, and you want to contribute. And I'm sure that along the way, in the 4 years, you've probably contributed a ton of energy, time, effort to help them, other than the money. So I mean, the money is really just the spark, and then you are involved, and you give input, and you try to help the company succeed. And it's not even really so much because you've put the money in, but because you've kind of wanted to.
You get engaged. You get hooked.
You get hooked. Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Again, let us know how that goes. We'd love to hear.
We'll do an update. In the real tent.
In the real tent. Yeah. Would love to welcome you to one of our trips in the Middle East. We're launching this in Beirut next month. And then we're doing some stuff in Dubai as well. Finally, we have one last thing that we do in the tent, and it's called Old Rules. And the idea is you tell us one of your fundamental rules that you live by, and one of the rules that you like people to abide when they're dealing with you, or in business or personal. Just something that's kind of your little ground rules that you practice every day or in deals.
Wow, this will sound so simple and trivial, but it's honesty. And it's amazing how hard that is sometimes with people.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think especially in the world we live in, which is a lot about spin, a lot about fear of just saying, here, I've got a real problem. Let me share it with you. And there's nothing I like less than being spun. And, well, there are a few things I like less than that. But I think it's just so valuable when people can say, even if it's just one-on-one or a couple of people, and you say, look, we've got these issues. How do we deal with them? And if people will put them on the table, we can fix things.
Yeah.
I mean, we human beings can fix things.
Yeah.
And if 3 are on the table and 2 are not, and you feel like you're wasting so much time and energy. So that's just a really, really key ground rule for me. And the other thing that kind of relates to that, but it's really about being mindful. And that's kind of a new word in our vocabulary, but I think we also live and operate at a pace that is so frenetic that it's easy to lose sight of just stopping and catching your breath and really thinking about what you're doing.
Totally. So on the first point, I want to make a comment. One of the things I've noticed in the Middle East is that the concept of transparency, which I guess is somewhat honesty, is not really accepted yet, because people are still afraid of people stealing their idea and not really being transparent. So that's one of the things we really want to educate the entrepreneurs on, that honesty and transparency are really important, because that's partially what makes the ecosystem work here. You are honest, you respect each other, you respect the opinion and time of someone, but you also you want their feedback, you want honest feedback from people, and if you're afraid of talking about your idea to either for someone to steal it, that's one issue. I mean, that's a whole, but you should be able to get honest feedback from the person and accept it and really respect that person's opinion and integrate it into what you're doing. So that's very important. And then as far as being mindful, I think even for myself, I get lost in my little vision sometimes, and I have to sometimes press stop and really say, okay, like, just be mindful of what I'm doing, where I'm at. And so both awesome pieces of advice. We have something, a little small T-shirt for you here. If you're ever jogging or exercising, a PITME T-shirt. I want to thank you again for the awesome story and the feedback, the input or advice. And thank you for your time, of course.
You're welcome.
And hopefully one of these days we can, you can join us in the Middle East, somewhere nice. Beirut and Lebanon is beautiful, and Dubai is actually really interesting as well. And I've traveled around the whole region, so I highly recommend.
I have some great friends from Lebanon, actually.
Oh,
so
awesome.
Yeah, good connections.
Wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, we are done today with Gwen here in the tent. I hope you enjoyed it. Want to thank ArabNet and our sponsor, PayPal. We'll see you next time. Peace.